Hello, my name's Gavin, this is Genre Books, and this is episode 12 of the List of Lost Penguins, an A to Z compilation of all the works put into Penguin Classics range and then dropped, specifically dropped as it went from this cream imprint, or cream bordered imprint, to the more modern black manifestation. Black, presumably, in mourning for all these great works that have been dropped. Last week's episode R was very short. This week could have been a really long one, but I have split S into 2 weeks. There are 8 books still to talk about, but there would have been a lot to talk about had I included all the S's in one go. So, S, part 1. And the first book is Ignatius Sancho, the letters of the late Ignatius Sancho, an African. He was a writer, he was a composer, most importantly, he was an abolitionist. The story was that he was actually born on a British slave ship. He was certainly raised a slave and raised to be a servant, but he, as a teenager, ran away. But after this, he did find himself a place in British society and ended up with some illustrious correspondence. He was not the first person of African descent to vote in the British general election, but he was the second. But if you want firsts, he was the first person of African descent to have his obituary in the papers, and these letters, published posthumously, were the first published letter collection of a man of African descent. You would think this would be an important enough first to keep you in the range. Penguin have other ideas. But for the second book, we skip back a few centuries from the time of Ignatius Sancho to the 13th and 14th centuries. Sagas of warrior poets. Cormac's saga, the saga of Gunnlaug Serpent Tongue, the saga of Björn, champion of the Hitterdal people, Vigland's saga. Lots of sagas, edited by Diana Whaley, now dropped. For book number 3, we turn to Amantine Lucille au Rod du Pont de Francheuil, better known to us as George Sand. This is Lettre d'un Voyageur from the 1830s and the 1840s. She was a novelist, journalist, quite controversial in her time. On the face of it, this book is travel writing, but really it's much more. I think there is still some George Sand in the Penguin Classics range, but this one has been let go. Occasionally in this list we have seen multiple works by authors being dropped from the range. I think this might be a record though, and it's a little bit of opposite timing, because a group of us are just currently, this comes out in November, doing a group read of Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Now this is not a Penguin Classics edition, but it might be more difficult to find Penguin Classics editions of Sir Walter Scott novels, because book number 4 is by Walter Scott, as is book number 5, book number 6 and book number 7. The Antiquary. This is the third in the Waverley series by Scott, and this book was Scott's own favourite. The Bride of Lammermoor. This is the earlier version of The Bride of Lammermoor. It's a book set before 1707, obviously famous for the Act of Union of England and Scotland, creating the United Kingdom. The third, The Tale of Old Mortality. This is a Restoration era drama, and it is the book that made Sir Walter Scott famous. And finally, fourth for Scott, seventh on this list, Redgauntlet, a tale of the Third Jacobite Rebellion. If dropping so many Walter Scott books makes you angry, use that anger and join us for this Ivanhoe read along. I think by the time this comes out, we'll only be a week into it, so plenty of time to catch up. Let me know in the comments. But moving on from Sir Walter Scott, book number 8, Catharine Maria Sedgewick, Hope Leslie, or Early Times in the Massachusetts. This is the author of A New England Tale. Her reputation was somewhat buried in the late 19th century, as there were attempts at the time for creating a canon of American literature that was distinctly masculine in appearance. But it was recognised as a classic before being dropped again. And we're not done with the poetry yet. The last book for today, yes, it's another fairly short episode, selected poems, and the selected poems of 3 poets, all from the 17th century, round about the Restoration era. Abraham Cowley, Edmund Waller, and John Oldham. Cowley was a poetry prodigy. Try saying that 5 times. His family and he was a royalist in the Civil War and found himself consequently exiled in Paris. I think he was actually in attendance to Queen Henrietta Maria. I'd have to check that. Edmund Waller was another royalist. He was a member of Parliament. He was also banished, both to France and Switzerland. But in 1651, during the interregnum, he actually returned. It probably helped that one of his relations was a certain Oliver Cromwell. In terms of his poetry, Andrew Marvell was not a fan, but John Dryden, England's first poet laureate, was. And Dryden was also a fan of the third of these poets, John Oldham. Oldham's poems were much more satirical, possibly what you're not expecting from, I think he was a member of the clergy. But they were so satirical that for a long time he had to remain anonymous. Satire was put to good use in the Civil War as the printed word became a weapon of the times. But being used as a weapon meant that it was often treated as such, and keeping anonymous with your satires, even if they might be good enough poetry, was probably a wise idea, as whoever was in charge did keep changing throughout the 1640s and 1650s, 1660s and 1670s and 80s as well. Yes, things didn't really settle down properly until the 18th century, when we decided just to vent our violence and frustration on the rest of the world. But on that happy note, that is the end of the first half of the letter S. Until next time.